This presentation will go a little bit into detail. It's sort of an extension to the presentations that you might have seen in the past. Last year there was a very extensive presentation on orphan drug designation in general. It's still stored on our website, so for those who are new to the orphan field, I recommend looking at that presentation for a lot of details. And today we'll focus mostly on the notice. So to just jump back into the regulatory framework and the legal background, the orphan regulation was put in place in the year 2000 and laid down the framework as it is today, including the formation of the Committee for Orphan Medicinal Products, the criteria for designation, the incentives and the procedure. The regulation is complemented by the Commission regulation, which goes into detail on implementation of the regulation. And now, as of 2016, we have the Commission notice on the application of Articles 3, 5, and 7 of regulation on orphan medicinal products. This document replaced, in a way, the 2003 Commission communication. It, at the time when it was prepared, was open for public consultation, and at the time it was implemented caused a certain vivid discussion. So we thought that today would be useful to give you some views on what we have experienced so far using it since 2017, yes. So just to position it within the timelines of where does this notice and does the orphan regulation have an impact on the life cycle of a drug. The initial orphan drug designation can be applied for at any stage of development in principle, so often at a non-clinical stage of development, as long as the intent to treat, otherwise phrased as medical plausibility, can be established. But it can be applied for any time prior to the marketing authorization. Then at marketing authorization, there's a review of the orphan drug designation and the maintenance of the orphan drug designation may or may not be granted depending on whether the criteria are still fulfilled. And then now, thanks to the notice, we have this new element in which the eligibility or the maintenance of orphan drug status may be reviewed in some certain cases at the time of variation. So for some products, this would happen with every cycle of extension of indication. So just to give you an overview, the notice introduced several key elements. It provided a sort of a more granular clarification on the implementation of the regulation. One of them was the clarification that the prevalence may be 0 in the EU at the time of orphan drug designation. And in context of significant benefit, there were 2 aspects that were also clarified with regards to availability, that in principle availability shouldn't be used, but if it is in exceptional circumstances, it should be tied to the patient harm. And then another element of clarification was that in certain cases, the COMP may consider hospital formulations as satisfactory methods in case they are in general practice and widespread use across Europe. But today's presentation is focusing on the third element, which is this reassessment at the time of type 2 variation, where a verification of significant benefit may be required. So this is a snapshot of our experience so far. since the implementation on the 18th of November 2016 of the notice. 28 products were affected in total since then by this new wording of the guidance document, 7 of which were at the stage of initial orphan drug designation, in either that the prevalence was estimated to be 0 or how the significant benefit discussion would pan out. But as you can see, majority of products were at the stage of either initial marketing authorization stage or an extension of indication, with 17 reassessments considered at the time. 17 reassessments is a major workload increase on the comp operations, and the comp early in 2017 laid out sort of internal practice decisions on when would the reassessment be made, and of the 17 reassessments or extensions of indication, in case of 7, the reassessment was not necessary, and that was deemed not necessary when it was an extension to pediatric patients or patients where no other treatment was available. In case of 10 products, reassessment was needed, either because there was an extension to a different line of treatment or including a new mutation, so a new patient subpopulation, or non-biomarker patients and so forth. So, to further clarify where does the comp reassess, the guidance now is very clear, is that with regards to a reassessment review of the criteria of orphan drug designation, the comp needs to look at all type 2 variations in principle, but in cases which are deemed clearly positive, the comp decided not to reassess, and these cases include the extensions to different age groups. The comp considers that there are no changes to the clinical characteristics of the condition in such extensions, and such the significant benefit was already assessed for the whole broad condition. So there are no justified and serious doubts as to whether the significant benefit would hold. And here we have an example of Nplate, for instance, one of the earliest examples where initially the product was authorized for the treatment of idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura in adults, and then subsequently, upon the completion of PIP, the sponsor extended to pediatric population and submitted a justification to the comp that they don't see a need for reassessment because it's just a fulfillment of the PIP. And the comp concurred with the opinion of the sponsor, and the reassessment wasn't necessary, so the product maintained its orphan drug status. Similar scenario would be expected if nothing was approved for that new target population within the same condition, orphan condition, and if already authorized indication, the extension was to an already authorized indication for which the comp already had done an assessment. So if there's something authorized, but there was already assessment initially made for that population, then it's not necessary. On the other hand, reassessment is needed if a target population is broadened within the orphan condition. For instance, if the treatment is moved up to frontline treatment and was initially authorized for further line. And that was the case with the Darzalex extension, initially authorized for plasma cell myeloma in third-line treatment, and subsequently the sponsor came for an extension to frontline in patients not eligible to stem cell therapy transplantation. And luckily, in this case, the sponsor was prepared. They came with clinical data, comparative data, demonstrating significant benefit over the authorized treatments, and the comp assessed this in the same way it was assessed at initial marketing authorization, and the sponsor maintained also the orphan drug status. Similarly, if there would be an extension to a different severity, biomarker, mutations, where alternative methods of treatment exists, or where in the meantime, since the initial marketing authorization, where new methods were authorized, there the assessment would be necessary. So what is needed in practical terms from the applicant? The procedure is the same pretty much as for the initial maintenance report. So the maintenance report for an applicant is required. If the sponsor is convinced that there is no reassessment needed, a shortened version of such report is sufficient with the justification. But all criteria for orphan drug designation have to be discussed, not just the significant benefit, but also the prevalence and condition and so forth. The similar timelines are in place as for the accelerated assessment. So pretty much at the time of filing of variation, the sponsor would file the application or the orphan maintenance report. And the level of evidence expected is pretty much similar to this at the initial marketing authorization. So similar challenges exist, and particularly with regards to significant benefit. Of note here, the sponsor may prepare for this eventuality of a reassessment by requesting protocol assistance and ask the comp whether the company's strategy or the development plan will suffice for justifying the significant benefit. And so it's sort of the long-term thinking and observing the space with regards to what competitors are coming into the market at the same time pays off in this context very much. And then the last sort of word of caution, I'm sure that those who are in the orphan or orphan drug designation holders already know. There's a new platform as of October 2018 of submission of orphan applications. Now we have this IRIS portal and also extensions of indication and initial maintenance reports will be processed via this portal. And here maybe a word to note that maintenance reports perhaps are best submitted a few days after the submission to CHMP because it allows our internal databases to integrate data and to make sure that while you file things in your applications in IRIS, your product is already there. So, but if you have any other technical questions regarding IRIS, I would recommend you to go to the info session during lunch break, which is going to take place in the room 3L, I suppose. And that's all from my side, and I'll be happy to take questions with the help of Laura here from Regulatory Affairs. She might take more regulatory questions. Thank you.